The last thing I would like to mention before the theory. I want to show you how Git stores the data and what this data actually is. You can see in my Git folder, I have new folder created, which is the objects in repo. Repo is the shortcut for the repository, so you may come across this term. So what I want to do now is to go to my PowerShell, put cd, and drag my folder into it to get inside this folder. You can see we are in this folder as well in our PowerShell. Let's open it in our file explorer and let's get to work. Let's start with initializing our repository with the git init command. We can see that our repository now is created as the hidden Git folder. So let's go to this folder. Inside we have our files and our folders. And what we are interested in today is this objects folder inside our repository. Let's open it. These folders info and pack are not important for us at this point because we will focus on the objects folders which will be created by Git during our work. So let's create a new file in our project. And let's call it name.txt. So we will create a name.txt file with the Damian content in it. Now I will hit enter and I want you to check if something will happen in this objects folder right here. Let's check it. As you can see, nothing actually happened. Let's check if this file exists with the ls command, and we can see it is. Let's check it in our file explorer as well. We can see this file exists. Let's hit git status in our PowerShell. And we can see that this file exists, but is now untracked. So we have to add it to the staging area so it could be tracked by Git and remembered in our repository in the future. Let's go to our Git folder once again and our objects folder. Let's clear our console and PowerShell. Let's add this file to the staging area. And now let's see if something will happen in our objects folder when I hit enter. Let's check it out. And you can see the effect right here. We have a new folder created. The moment we added this file to the staging area, Git created this object. And this object is stored in the form of a hash. Let's open it. And that means there is probably a 40-character hexadecimal number in the name of this object. The first two characters are in the folder name right here. And the remaining 38 characters are in the file name inside that folder. And in this object, we already saved our name.txt file. Now let's go back in our file explorer. And let's do a commit to save these changes to our repository. With a commit message, add a file name.txt. Now let's check what will happen in our objects folder in our file explorer. Let's hit enter. And now you can see that we have two newly created folders in our objects folder. Let's change the view of our explorer. Let's change the sorting options and let's choose date modified to see which folder is the oldest and which one is the newest. Now let's look what's actually inside this first object. The first one we created in this project. Let's go to PowerShell. We have this command cat file with the p flag, which will allow us to see the content of a certain object we want to check. And now what we want to do is to place the whole name of the object we want to check, the whole 40 characters. As you may remember, the first 2 characters are placed in the folder name. So let's copy it. Let's paste it right here. And the rest of it is inside this folder in a file name. So let's copy it as well. Let's paste it here. And let's press enter. Of course, I did a mistake. We have to place git command before this. So what we need to type is git cat file, a p flag, and the name of our object we want to check. Now let's try it. And what you can see right here is the deciphered content of this object, which we can see exactly right here. And it's the Damian text. Now let's check the type of this object. We are going to use the same command as we did previously, but not with the p flag, but with a t flag instead, and that will allow us to check the type of this object. Let's hit enter, and what you can see right here is that this object is actually a blob. Our repository stores several types of data. The first type of data is the blob, or a binary object. So you can see that the content of this object is Damian, and its type is a blob. It's also good to know that Git creates these folders like this because it's more efficient for it. There can be multiple objects with the same 2 first characters in their name, and they will all be added to the same folder. So every object starting with 87 at front of its name will be stored in this folder 87, etc, etc. As I said, it's more efficient for Git. Now let's check the type of the next object. Let's use the same command as we did previously. Let's copy the first 2 letters from the folder. The rest of it from the file. And let's hit enter. And as you can see, the type of this second object is commit. Now let's check the content of this object. All we have to do is change the flag from T to P. Let's hit enter. And now you can see the content of our commit object, where we can see the reference to a tree with its own hash, which we will get to it in a moment. We have author, email, and a time when it happened. Also, we have a committer, because the author and the committer may be 2 different people, but that's not important for now. And we have the commit message, which is the add a file name txt. So now let's clear our console. And let's check the type of the last object. Let's go back to our objects folder. And the latest one is placed here. So I will copy those 2 letters from the folder name, the rest from the file name. Let's hit enter. And what we can see is that the third type of the object is the tree. So let's check the content of this tree object. What we want to do is change the flag from the T to the P. Let's hit enter. And here we can see that the tree object has inside the reference to all the files it contains. For now, we have only one file, which is name.txt, which you can see right here. And here you can see the reference to this file, which is its own hash. So let's create a new file in our project. with the echo command, with what's in it. And now let's create index HTML file. Let's hit enter. Let's go back to our projects folder. Let's add this new file to the staging area. You can see we have new object in our objects folder. Now I want to show you what will happen if we create a file that has the same content as another file. So let's do it. Echo Damian, and now let's call it user.txt. As we know, we have a file named txt which has the same content, which is Damian. Now we are going to have another file which is user.txt with the same content. Let's hit enter. Let's check our Git status. You can see that we have one file added to the staging area, which is index.html. And you can see when I was adding it to the staging area, this particular object was created. Now we can see we have a user.txt file waiting to be added to the staging area. So let's check if something will happen in our objects folder when we add this new file to the staging area. Let's hit enter. And you can see that nothing actually happened. Let's clear our console. Let's check our Git status. And you can see that all our new files are added to the staging area. And you can remember that while adding this file, a new object was created, while when we added this file, nothing actually happened in our objects folder. And here's why. You need to know that Git creates objects for the content and not for the file names. From a Git's point of view, the file name doesn't matter at this point. The content matters. If there are two different files with the same content, Git doesn't create the new object. Now let's commit these changes. Let's call it just second commit. Let's hit enter. And here you can see we have two new objects created once again. Let's refresh it. And you probably now can see this situation when the only one folder was added. And moreover, you can see it's not the newest one. If we go to this folder now, we can see our new object, but you can also see that 3D folder is still at the top of our list. And that's why when we go to there, you can see two objects now. And this is the situation I was talking to you a couple moments before. Git stores the data in this particular way because it's more efficient to it. Now we have two objects starting with these two characters at the beginning of their name, which is 3D. And when we go to this folder, we have these two objects, the older one and the newer one. Now let's check the content and the type of these two new objects. Let's go to our PowerShell. Let's find our command we need. First, we're gonna check the content of this newly created object. Let's check this one first with the 06 at the beginning. Let's hit enter. We can see it's a commit, but let's check its type just to be sure. You can see it's commit right here. And what interesting we can see in this commit. Just like before, we can see the commit message, which is the second commit right here. we can see the committer, we can see the author, we can see a reference to its tree object, which is exactly right here. But what's interesting is the parent of this commit. This is something that we didn't see in the previous commit. And this tells us what was the previous commit. What is the parent object of this particular object? The first commit has no parent because it's the first one. However, each next commit has a parent, and the info about it is stored in the object of this commit. Remember that every time we do a commit, we create a commit object with the metadata and the parent reference. Now let's check our last object. Let's check its type first. We know we are going to find it in this folder 3D. And that will be the first one on our list. Let's hit enter. You know what? Let's clear our console first. Let's do it again. We can see it's a tree right here. Now let's check its content. Just changing the flag from the T to the P. Let's hit enter. And that's what we'll get. In our tree object, we have reference to all the files in our repository. So let's check them out. You can see we have index.html, name.txt, and user.txt. We can see the type of these objects, which are all blobs, which you can see right here. And we can see the reference, which is the particular hash to a particular file. And what you can see and what is interesting is that name.txt and the user.txt has exactly the same hash, which you can see right here. And that's because they have the same content, which is Damian. But why name.txt file is in this object if we didn't modify it at all? Because in the tree object we have everything, our complete project. The tree is the structure of our project, and in the tree object we will find everything that is in our project at this point. The tree object collects the entire structure of our project, thanks to know Git knows where each file is. In addition to that, our files from the working directory are also stored in the form of the binary objects, which are the blob objects. Now the last thing I want to show you before we jump on to the theory. We have this command git hash object and the name of the file we want to check. Let's hit enter. And this is what we will get. So this command allows us to check the hash reference to the object where our file is stored in. Now let's check the hash of our user file. Let's hit enter. And you can see this hash is exactly the same because the content of these two files, name.txt and user.txt, is exactly the same. So let's go to our working directory in our file explorer. Let's modify our user.txt file, which we got right here. Doesn't matter at all. Let's save these changes. And once again, let's check the hash object to this file. And now you can see it's totally different because the content of this file was modified. Now let's check our git log with the one line flag. And when we are checking our git log with the one line flag, before each commit, we can see the 7 first characters of the object of this commit, which is usually enough to find the particular object we want to refer to. Now let's put git log without this flag. And in this option, within each commit, we can see the whole hash number of each commit object we have in our repository. Interestingly enough, if now you will create any file on your computer with the Damian content in your repository using PowerShell, because Git Bash can encode the objects a bit differently, it will have exactly the same hash number as my file. For example, let's clear this console. Let's create a new file. And let's check its hash. Like this. If you create in your repository on your own computer a file with the same content, which is Damian, you will get the same hash number as I did exactly right here. And at this point, even if we haven't added this file to the staging area yet, it already has its hash number because it has the same content as an existing file in our project. And that would be it. Let's finally get to the theory.